Under the buzzing neon of Seoul's Hongdae district, Yoon Song sat in the corner of the Midnight Pearl, her black lace sleeves brushed against the sticky table, her gothic jewelry clinking softly as she moved. She ignored the K-pop blasting from the street, her eyes fixed on the handwritten menu. The boba shop was dim and narrow, smelling of burnt sugar and something sharp and metallic. "One special abyss," she whispered to the shadow behind the counter, her dark-lined eyes narrowing with anticipation. The server, a man with skin like crumpled parchment, slid a tall plastic cup across the counter. The liquid inside was an ink-black sludge, and the pearls at the bottom weren't uniform. They were jagged and pulsing with a faint rhythmic throb. Yoon Song's wide, fanged grin stretched across her face, mirroring the unsettling mascot on the shop's wall. She plunged an oversized straw into the depths of the cup with a wet, squelching sound that made the ice rattle. The first pearl didn't taste like tapioca. It burst against Yoon Song's tongue with a hot, iron-rich spray that filled her mouth. She didn't flinch. She leaned back in her chair, her neck elongating as she sucked harder on the straw. The ink-black tea began to stain her lips, trailing down her chin in dark, viscous streaks that looked like oil. She began to hum a low, discordant tune, her body swaying as if caught in a dark, sugary trance. Ji-yoon pushed through the heavy glass doors, the bell chiming a mournful, cracked note. She had come to find her friend after the late-night study session, but the air inside the shop felt heavy and suffocating. She spotted Yoon Song in the back corner, but the sight made her heart hammer against her ribs. Yoon Song's shadow on the wall seemed too large and jagged, moving with a life of its own, twitching even when the girl sat perfectly still. "Yoon Song?" Ji-yoon called out, her voice trembling in the silence. Yoon Song didn't turn. She was busy tearing at the plastic film lid of her drink with her teeth, her movements primal and frantic. The special abyss was now a bubbling cauldron of crimson and black. As the lid finally gave way, a fountain of thick red fluid erupted, splashing over Yoon Song's pale skin and her black lace dress, looking less like tea and more like a fresh, jagged wound. Yoon Song began to scoop the pearls out with her bare hands, her fingers looking impossibly thin and skeletal against the red gore. She shoved a handful into her mouth, the sound of popping membranes echoing through the shop like wet firecrackers. With every bite, her jaw seemed to unhinge further, her mouth stretching wider than any human's should, filled with rows of needle-like teeth that shredded the organic pearls into a pulpy mess. Ji-yoon took a hesitant step toward the table, her hands shaking. "Stop it, Yoon Song, you're hurting yourself," she cried out. Yoon Song finally looked up, her face a mask of blood and shadow. A long, prehensile tongue flicked out to lick the dark syrup from her own cheek. "I'm still parched," Yoon Song hissed, her voice a wet, bubbling gargle. Her arms began to stretch and crack, the bones audibly shifting as they reached across the table toward Yoon. The transformation accelerated with a sickening sound of tearing fabric and snapping bone. The messy buns on Unsong's head didn't just come undone, they uncurled like the legs of a predatory insect, thick strands of hair turning into twitching, chitinous appendages. Her skeletal frame grew tall and distorted, her ribs expanding until they threatened to burst through her dress. She stood atop the table, the ruined boba cup crushed beneath her boot, leaking a river of crimson syrup across the floor. Ji-yoon scrambled backward, her heels skidding on the blood-slicked tile. The shop's neon signs flickered one last time and died, leaving only the cold, filtered glow of the streetlights to illuminate the nightmare. The thing that used to be Yoon Song loomed over the counter, her long tongue dipping into the vat of pearls stored behind the glass. They weren't tapioca, they were tiny beating hearts, harvested for the shop's cursed brew, and they pulsed in unison with the creature's own frantic breathing. The doors of the Midnight Pearl locked with a heavy, metallic thud that echoed down the empty street. From the sidewalk, the shop looked like any other abandoned business, its windows dark and silent. But if a passerby looked closely at the glass, they might see a single bloody handprint sliding slowly down the pane. Inside, the sound of wet crunching continued, and Yoon Song's shadow stretched across the floor, a tall, many-limbed nightmare with a hunger that no tea could ever hope to satisfy.